The phrase puer aeternus, Latin for eternal boy, first echoes through time in the verses of Ovid's Metamorphoses. There, he honors Iacchus, a radiant child god central to the Eleusinian mysteries, a sacred initiation rite woven around the divine feminine. As myth evolved, this youthful god took on other names: Bacchus, Eros, Dionysus, deities of ecstasy, of life, death, and the sacred return. Symbols not of simple youth, but of youth infused with the pulse of immortality. Centuries later, Swiss psychoanalyst Carl Jung breathed life into this ancient name once more, not to speak of mythology alone, but of the deep architecture of the soul. He used puer aeternus to describe an inner figure found within all of us, the eternal child. In women, it's known as puella aeterna. This archetype, like all archetypes, is two-faced. On one side, it glows with innocence, beauty, and boundless imagination. On the other, it casts a long shadow, one that traps us in the illusions of youth, where the real world becomes an unbearable weight and dreams become cages. The eternal child is not a passing phase. It's the first psychic imprint we carry from birth, and it lingers within us through every stage of life. Deeply entwined with the mother archetype, the puer avoids what Jung called individuation, the soul's natural drive toward wholeness and maturity. And by resisting that inner growth, something inside quietly begins to atrophy. While the puer may dwell in vivid fantasy and possess a rich inner cosmos, that world stays locked away, never translated into reality, never actualized. It's a garden that refuses to bloom above the soil. A moment from modern myth makes this clear. In The Matrix, Neo is offered two pills, the blue or the red. The blue returns him to illusion, to comfort, to sleep. The red awakens him to brutal truth, to transformation. The puer, clinging to the comforts of the familiar, terrified of the unknown, will almost always reach for the blue. This archetype becomes especially relevant when life begins to stall. When relationships remain shallow, when work becomes intolerable, when dreams are vivid but actions are few, it is often the eternal child within that resists the weight of reality. But paradoxically, healing begins not by destroying this archetype, but by understanding it, and weaving it into the tapestry of an adult life. Here lies the tragedy of the puer aeternus, the man-child, not because he cannot grow, but because he refuses to. He delegates the burden of life to others, especially his parents, expecting them to untangle his failures and cushion his fall. Responsibility, for him, is an unbearable weight. Curiosity fades into apathy. He might be clever, even imaginative, but he never learns, not really, because he never commits to the journey of understanding. Marie-Louise von Franz paints this figure vividly. His life is marked by a restless dissatisfaction. Every opportunity seems flawed. Every relationship carries a quiet discontent. The job is never quite right. The woman is never quite the one. There's always a detail that spoils the picture, a flaw that justifies his refusal to stay, to settle, to devote. He lives in a world of maybes and almosts, forever standing at the threshold, never crossing it. Deep down, the puer recognizes how fragile life is. He knows that every high must fall, every joy ends, every bond may break. So rather than risk the pain of eventual loss, he holds back from the start. He exits emotionally before he even enters. His mind rehearses the goodbye before the first hello is even spoken. And in doing so, he unconsciously manifests the very emptiness he fears. This is the pathology of avoidance dressed up as wisdom. He believes he's protecting himself from heartbreak. But in truth, he's evading life. His hyper-awareness, his overthinking, far from being an intellectual gift, is a paralysis. His thoughts become a maze with no exit, a mirror reflecting only itself. To truly live, one must face death. Not just the end of the body, but the death of illusions, of youth, of comfort. For the pure, this is unthinkable. The descent into reality is like a fall from Eden, paradise lost. What was once a mother's womb becomes the world's battlefield, and he cannot bear to enter it. From the outside, he seems merely drowsy, absent-minded, adrift. But beneath the fog, there often hides a secret, a rich fantasy life, intoxicating and grand. In these dreams, he is exceptional, a misunderstood genius, a prophet, a visionary. But the dreams never step out into daylight. They have no form, no flesh, no work behind them. He imagines himself an artist, but the canvas is blank. He is the poet who never writes, the thinker who never teaches, the revolutionary who never risks. His brilliance remains an idea, untouched, untested, unreal. The pure lives not in the world, but in the vapor of dreams. He drifts through passive fantasy, lush, consuming, and beautifully useless. This is not the active imagination that Jung encouraged, where images from the unconscious are engaged with, shaped, and made real. No, the pure's fantasies are static, indulgent, unearned. He dreams of triumph, but never prepares for failure. And because he avoids the fall, he never truly rises. Carl Jung described the pure as someone who leads a provisional life, a life lived in waiting, never grounded in the soil of now, never anchored to any real thing. His future is a dreamscape, vivid, idealized, and endlessly postponed. He imagines what could be, but never plants his feet long enough to become anything. He aches for freedom, yet shrinks from structure. Rules suffocate him. Boundaries offend him. Commitments feel like cages. He wants to remain untouched. But in avoiding the dirt, he avoids the harvest. This provisional life is a haunting epidemic of our modern age, a subtle disease of spirit. It shows up in the person who believes his job, his partner, his home, his creative path. None of it is truly it. It's all just temporary, placeholder, a bridge to something undefined, but supposedly better. Someday, later, eventually. Jung called this condition the modern European disease of the merely imaginary life. And we see it today more than ever. The digital dreamer, the emotionally avoidant lover, the artist forever outlining his next project, all quietly waiting for the real life to begin. But to live provisionally is to live detached from soul. The pure resists the gravity of commitment because it demands form, discipline, repetition, responsibility. Instead, he escapes upward into fantasy, into abstract freedom, into Neverland. Like Peter Pan, he floats in a timeless dreamscape where no one grows old, and nothing is ever fully lived. Hence the nickname, Peter Pan syndrome. But this is not innocence. This is a slow erosion of identity. The one who floats too long begins to dissolve. He no longer knows who he is, only what he wishes to be, and that emptiness stirs restlessness. So he seeks transcendence in fleeting highs. Drugs, sex, thrill-seeking, chaotic love, spiritual bypassing. Anything to spark a fleeting sense of aliveness. But these are not paths to wholeness. They are distractions from collapse. He is not lazy, not in the usual sense. He is alienated, disconnected from the earth of his own being. He ruminates, fantasizes, talks of plans and dreams and deep meanings, but nothing takes root. His ideas don't land. His visions don't touch the ground. In an ancient parable, the philosopher Thales gazes so intently at the stars that he falls into a well. The heavens are infinite, but he forgets the stone beneath his feet. The pure, likewise, is always looking up, never down, never in, never forward. He has vision, beauty, depth, but these qualities hover in limbo. They never incarnate. He misses the mess and blood and sweat of real life, the struggle that gives soul its shape. Von Franz describes the day of such a man. Rising late, drifting through smoke and silence, postponing work, postponing meaning. Days consumed by friends, lovers, philosophy, wine, and vague dreams. Nights of long conversations, empty of outcome. It's not that he lacks treasure. It's that the treasure never leaves the cave. His gifts remain unspent, growing heavy and burdensome. Fantasies swell, potential chokes, and slowly, the man disappears into the cloud of what might have been. The puer has an uncanny ability to absorb wisdom. He listens deeply, nods thoughtfully, echoes profound truths as if they've landed. For a moment, it seems he's about to change, as if he's ready to cross the bridge into real life. But that moment fades. The ideas stay in his head. Nothing moves into action. That's the quiet illusion he casts, the illusion of growth. But his so-called transformation is imagined, not lived. He thinks he understands. He even fantasizes about applying the insight. But he never does. Reality, for him, is something to rehearse, not inhabit. To be human, in its original sense, means to be of the earth, humus. Real life isn't meant to be lived in the clouds of the mind. It requires mud, mistakes, scars, humility. To be human is to be grounded in the dirt of experience, where pain and beauty coexist. But the puer would rather float, untethered, untouched. He is Icarus in modern form, seduced by light, driven by dreams of soaring. But like the myth, he flies too close to the sun. His fragile wings, crafted from idealism and escape, dissolve. He falls not because he reached too far, but because he never learned to land. Jung called this the provisional life, a ghost-like existence where one watches life unfold without ever stepping into it. A stage play where the actor forgets he was meant to act, not just observe. He tells the haunting story of a young woman, caught in this fog of disconnection. She moved through life like a shadow. She spoke, acted, made choices, but nothing touched her. She was unreachable. She lived, but without presence. Jung tried to guide her into contact with life, but her psyche refused entry. She existed behind glass. Not long after, she took her own life. A gunshot to the heart, right there in the street. But here's what makes the story unforgettable. She didn't die immediately. For a minute or two, she remained conscious. Jung saw her body, and what he saw stunned him. Her face had changed. He stared at her for a long time, trying to understand the expression. And then it came to him, it was the look of someone who had spent their entire life convinced that something was black. And in the final seconds saw that it was red. A bewildered clarity. A strange, almost serene astonishment. As if, in that brief window between the shot and death, she understood. For the first time, she had seen what life really was. But only in the moment she lost it. Sometimes it takes immense injury for the psyche to wake up. Sometimes the cost of awakening is devastating. That's how far removed some people are, not by choice but by a deep unconscious split. A psyche trapped in the inner world too long begins to drown in it. The ego, unable to emerge from Neverland, eventually collapses. What we refuse to live turns against us. But not all suffering wears the face of eternal boyhood. Some children are forced to grow up far too early, the inverted mirror of the puer. These are the prematurely aged. Life, in its harshness, ripped wonder away from them before they were ready. They became independent, responsible, disenchanted long before their time. You can see it in their eyes, the tightness of someone who had to learn not to trust. The cautious smile of someone who never got to play. These are the lost children of realism. For them, life is task, not tale. They don't know how to love or let love in. And so, life begins to feel hollow. There is no meaning, no magic. The flame of eternal youth, the one that was meant to animate the adult spirit, has gone cold. The work of the therapist, in this case, is not to push them forward, but to lead them back into their childhood dreams. Not to live in them forever, but to reclaim them, heal them, and carry them forward into life with wholeness. There's another side to the eternal child, a luminous one. When the puer is in balance, he's radiant, spiritually alive. His charm, his enthusiasm, and his hunger for meaning can light up a room. He carries the energy of new beginnings, like the divine child, a symbol of potential, hope, and creative fire. Nietzsche recognized this. To him, becoming a child again wasn't regression, it was transformation. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he describes the child as the final stage of human becoming. The child is innocence and forgetfulness, a new beginning, a game, a self-propelling wheel, a first motion, a sacred yes. For the game of creating, my brothers, a sacred yes to life is needed. The inner child he speaks of doesn't emerge from immaturity, it's born after maturity. It's what appears when someone has passed through life's trials and returned with wonder intact. Even in old age, some people glow with that childlike presence. Not childish, but deeply alive. When this archetype is healthy, the puer is immersed in life. Curious, playful, bursting with imagination. He lives as if the world is enchanted. And in doing so, he creates. He affirms life. He says yes to what is and transforms it. Even the Bible echoes this archetype's wisdom. Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. But as time moves on, we meet another inner figure, the senex, Latin for old man. He too has his gifts: patience, discipline, grounded wisdom. He's the builder, the planner, the one who stays calm when storms rise. In his light form, he appears as the wise old man, the stable pillar in a chaotic world. But the senex has a shadow. He can become rigid, cynical, obsessed with order and control. He resists change, mocks spontaneity, and forgets how to laugh. When unbalanced, he turns cold and mechanical, a keeper of rules with no room for magic. The puer and the senex are opposites, but not enemies. They're mirror reflections, each revealing the other. We know youth because we know age. We feel the weight of age because we remember lightness. Jung once wrote, "The pure shadow is the senex, associated with Apollo, rational, structured, ordered. The senex's shadow is the puer, instinctual, chaotic, Dionysian. Apollo is clarity. Dionysus is ecstasy. One gives us form, the other gives us fire. One builds temples, the other dances in them. The puer dreams, the senex does. Both archetypes live inside us. Some lean more toward imagination, others toward control. But real growth, real balance, happens when the two can speak to each other. When the dreamer learns to build, and the builder remembers how to dream. The puer and senex each know how to play, but their games are different. The puer finds joy in the fleeting. He thrives on stimulation, adventure, and the thrill of novelty. Hanging out with friends, watching movies, eating out, playing sports. These are moments that excite, but leave no residue. They vanish as quickly as they arrive. The senex, in contrast, plays with purpose. His leisure has weight. Painting, gardening, writing, woodworking. His joy comes not from escape, but from shaping something real. His games leave behind a trace. Carl Jung, at his core, was a senex, but even he, in his darkest hour, found himself called back to the forgotten world of his inner child. He was going through what he would later call his confrontation with the unconscious. a time of great psychic disturbance. Looking for answers, he combed through the archives of his childhood, trying to find the cause. But his search turned up nothing but silence. Then he let go. He told himself, "If I know nothing, I'll simply follow whatever rises from within." And what surfaced was a memory. A boy no older than 10, playing with blocks, building tiny castles, tiny homes, over and over, lost in the rhythm of imagination. Jung was struck. That boy, that spirit, he was still alive inside him, buried, forgotten, and yet still pulsing with life. He felt foolish. A grown man called back to child's play, but he followed the impulse. Each day after lunch, before seeing patients, he would go to the garden and build miniature homes, towers of stone, simple, small things. But as he built, something shifted. His mind began to clear. His energy returned. A hidden stream of creativity began to flow again. He later wrote, "This moment was a turning point in my fate. I had only the inner certainty that I was on the way to discovering my own myth. The building game was just the beginning." It released a stream of fantasies I later carefully wrote down. This wasn't a hobby. It was soul repair. He followed the trail all the way to Balingen, a secluded place on the shores of Lake Zurich, where he would spend 12 years building the tower. Stones stacked with his own hands. No electricity, just nature, silence, and presence. He wrote, "At Balingen, I am in the midst of my true life. I am most deeply myself. This is the essence of the Senex rediscovering the puer. Play as sacred restoration, structure nurturing spirit. And then there's The Little Prince, the poetic creation of Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, a perfect embodiment of the puer aeternus, wide-eyed, otherworldly, full of wonder. The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry is one of the most well-known books in the world. He displays all the typical features of the puer aeternus, which, however, does not alter the fact that he was also a great writer. He worked as a professional aviator and died during World War II in an airplane crash. When he was not allowed to fly, he always became depressed, walking up and down in his flat from morning till evening, desperate and irritated. In the opening of The Little Prince, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry doesn't simply tell a story. He opens a portal into a world shaped by memory, imagination, and the tragic distance between the inner child and the adult mind. The book begins not with fiction, but with fragments of the author's real life, his childhood wonder and his early heartbreak. At the age of 6, he was mesmerized by an image in a book, a boa constrictor swallowing its prey whole. No chewing, just silence. A deep sleep lasting 6 months for digestion. Inspired, he drew his own version, his first creation, a mysterious, closed shape. To him, it was alive with meaning. To adults, it was nothing but a hat. They didn't see what he saw, that inside the shape was an elephant, consumed and dreaming in the belly of a snake. And so, as many artists do, he tried to explain. He drew the same snake, this time in cross-section, the elephant exposed for all to see. But instead of awakening their imagination, it confirmed their disinterest. They told him to set aside his drawings, to pursue serious things, math, grammar, geography, real life. So he abandoned his path as an artist. He became a pilot, a man of the skies, and yet he never stopped searching. Wherever he went, he carried the image, drawing number 1. He would show it to grown-ups and wait, just wait to see if someone, anyone, could see the truth behind the illusion. But none ever did. They only saw the hat. He wandered alone in the world, misunderstood, until his plane crashed in the desert. A moment lifted straight from his real-life brush with death. Dehydrated and delirious, he encountered something that felt more like myth than memory. A small voice. "Please, draw me a sheep." A boy had appeared out of the sand, not ordinary, but otherworldly. a messenger from the stars. And unlike every adult before him, this boy understood. The pilot showed him drawing number 1. "No," the boy said. "I don't want an elephant inside a boa constrictor. I want a sheep." It was the first time someone saw beyond the surface. But even then, the narrator couldn't draw a sheep. So, in a weary act of improvisation, he sketched a simple box and said, "The sheep you want is inside." This moment reveals the lifelong struggle of the puer, the tension between the demands of the outer world and the longing of the soul. The engine of his aircraft, symbol of adult responsibility, is broken, but the voice of the child, the soul, is asking for attention. Too often, the eternal boy packs away his ambitions in metaphorical boxes, not with care, but with frustration, boredom, escape. And perhaps the greatest tragedy of all is this: the dream is real, the gift is alive, but it is hidden in the dark, sealed inside a box. What the puer must learn, and what Saint-Exupéry quietly urges, is this: choose one thing. Commit to it. Take it seriously, not just in the imagination, but in life. In this first movement of The Little Prince, the entire dilemma of the puer aeternus quietly unfolds. Beneath its dreamy narrative lies the cry of a man caught between two worlds, the wistful domain of the eternal child and the desolate landscape of adulthood. Saint-Exupéry, even as a grown man, had never truly set foot in the realm of adults. He wore its clothes, spoke its language, but his soul remained elsewhere. He was unraveling inside. Numbed by the mechanical grind of modern life, he found himself parched, emotionally, spiritually, wandering through a desert both literal and symbolic. The landscape of sand and sun mirrored the drought within him. No color, no wonder, no enchantment. The crash landing in the Sahara was more than an accident. It was an initiation, one that demanded he wake from the stupor of duty and remember what it meant to feel alive. His unconscious, tired of being ignored, staged an emergency. In the adult world he had drifted into, everything sacred had been traded for spreadsheets and seriousness. He writes of one such man: "There is a planet where a red-faced man resides. He's never smelled a flower, never gazed at a star, never loved another soul. All he does is count, adding figures day after day. And like so many others," he repeats, "I am a man of serious affairs," as if that meant something. Saint-Exupéry was not just criticizing a man. He was mourning a world, a culture that had traded the sacred for the sterile, a generation that no longer danced with mystery, but marched to deadlines. The inner child, the artist, the dreamer, remained untouched, but imprisoned, trapped behind the cold mask of adulthood. What haunted him wasn't just the boredom of the grown-up world, but the absence of a bridge, a passage that could carry the wild beauty of youth into the gravity of maturity. Wordsworth captured this loss with devastating precision. There was a time when every field and stream glowed with celestial wonder, the glory and the freshness of a dream. But now the world has dulled. The boy becomes a man, and the prison doors begin to close. How do we grow up without growing cold? How do we mature without amputating the soul? In Saint-Exupéry's case, something deeper still was at play, a symbolic entrapment in the archetypal mother. The nourishing, protective energy that once gave life had turned inward, smothering growth, halting emergence. He remained swaddled in the psychic womb, afraid to step into the wilderness of the adult world. The great mother had become the devourer. The protector had become the prison. Like the many-faced goddess Kali, she feeds and destroys in one breath, offering comfort that becomes a curse when clung to too long. Saint-Exupéry, for all his poetic brilliance, never crossed the threshold of transformation. He never took the path of the hero. And this is precisely what his iconic drawing of an elephant swallowed whole whispers to us in symbols. In African myth, the elephant is no ordinary creature. It is the noble giant, a living emblem of wisdom, strength, dignity, and unshakable presence. It represents the mature self, the one who journeys, who returns, who has faced the dragon and lived to tell the tale. But Saint-Exupéry's elephant is gone, swallowed, consumed, and not by the outer world, but by something more insidious, the devouring mother, that inner force born from the unconscious, that clutches the soul with comforting arms and never lets it grow. Ironically, the traits of the elephant, the gentle gravitas, the emotional depth, the quickness to rage that only music can soothe mirror Saint-Exupéry himself. It's as if his psyche painted the very image of what he longed to be, only to show it imprisoned inside a snake. He did not know what he was drawing, but the soul did. To break the spell of the puer aeternus, one must descend, not in fantasy but in body. One must return to earth, to the grit of dishes, deadlines, discipline. Real integration means real dirt under the fingernails. It is the only way to escape the weightless ether of dream life. And yet, there is a paradox here. The puer cannot simply become the hero in isolation. He must first become the sheep, the humble member of the herd, the very creature Saint-Exupéry placed in a box and dismissed. This symbolic act of joining the collective is the first blow to the mother complex. Because most young men cannot free themselves from the psychic mother by sheer force of will. They do it through society, through mingling, sweating, laughing, breaking bread with others. This is where warmth returns. This is where one first feels the pulse of real life. The tribe saves what the dream world devours. But this too has its danger. If he's not careful, the puer loses himself entirely in the noise. He trades his dream not for duty, but for dilution. In trying to escape his inflated specialness, he becomes no one at all. Just another face in the crowd. That's not individuation, it's evaporation. To guard against this, he must walk the razor's edge. Live among the many, but not as the many. Serve but also retreat. Lose the narcissistic fantasy of uniqueness, but protect the sacred fire of real individuality. It is a tension the soul must carry with maturity. Social integration on one side, solitary depth on the other. Nietzsche put it perfectly, "When I am among the many, I live as they do. I do not think as I truly think. It's as if they try to banish me from myself, to rob me of my soul. Then I grow angry, I grow afraid, and so I flee to the desert to become good again." Jung, too, painted this journey in the sky. He likened a human life to the arc of the sun. Dawn is birth, the climb our youth and ascent. At high noon we stand in our fullness, our prime. But then, the descent begins. Slowly, steadily, the sun sinks, aging, letting go. The body returns to shadow, and then it sets. But only through this arc does the soul become whole. Each phase of life speaks in a different voice, and the soul listens with a different ear. In the first half, the ego is king, building, striving, forming identity through work, romance, reputation. It is a time of rising suns and outward motion. But the second half belongs to the spirit. Its orientation turns inward, toward depth, toward truth, toward wholeness. When this pivot is ignored, when one tries to drag the priorities of youth into the landscape of maturity, something breaks. The soul begins to stir in protest. The result is often called a midlife crisis, but it is not a crisis of age. It is the cry of the psyche demanding to grow. Jung captured it with poetic clarity. The meaning of the morning is to take root in the world, to propagate, to nurture. But anyone who brings the laws of morning into the afternoon must pay for it with their soul. just as the adult who clings to childish egoism must pay for it with social ruin. The puer aeternus resists this passage. To him, the word work feels like exile. It seems like a betrayal of the inner dream, a flattening of his special essence. But the paradox is this: only through work, real, sustained, outer-world engagement, can he become exceptional in truth, rather than just in fantasy. This doesn't mean he must find the perfect job. It doesn't matter if he knows what he wants. The call is to choose something and stay, to plant his flag in the field of life, not to wander endlessly from cloud to cloud. Kierkegaard named this dilemma well: the vertigo of freedom, a panic that rises when we face infinite options. One can fall in two directions: into imitation, becoming a carbon copy of the world, or into paralysis, caught in endless dreaming and indecision. The puer tends to float from one role to another, quitting when the spark fades. He can work, but not joyfully. His energy resists structure. He knows laziness is his ruin, but cannot want to not be lazy. And so depression follows. Yet somewhere in him, there is a hidden reservoir of passion, a fire not yet touched. The key is to listen for where the energy wants to go, where there is even the faintest sense of yes. The unconscious whispers in symbols and hunches, pointing toward alignment. Still, even then, every path has dull moments. Even the most sacred calling demands repetition. Even magic turns mundane when placed in time. That is when the puer protests. That is when he wants to flee. But this is the threshold. This is where discipline becomes transformation. Jung said it plainly: there is no one path for a person to live by. Your path is made with each step. You cannot know it ahead of time. You simply walk. If you keep doing the next real thing, you move safely and truly along the road laid by your own soul. Speculating about how to live is useless. Just live. And that is the hidden secret. Not to figure it all out, but to show up. Not to escape the gravity of life, but to plant your feet and walk. Jung warns us: stop searching for life's meaning in distant abstractions. Don't waste your sacred fire chasing how to live. Just live. Dig your hands into the earth before you. Do what is nearest. Do what is real. When you do this, you step directly into the current of destiny. But the puer, the eternal child, resists that call. He refuses to cross the threshold of the mythic journey. He remains where it is safe, wrapped in the familiar, unwilling to face the unknown. He avoids the passage that demands he confront his greatest fear, be it memory, failure, trauma, or grief. And because of this, he never meets the dragon, and he never earns the gold. He avoids transformation because transformation requires death. Death of the old self, the old illusions. Without this inner death, there can be no rebirth. And without rebirth, the self cannot evolve. In tribal cultures, boys were seized in the night, taken deep into the wild by the elders, and tested by fire and fear. This was not cruelty, it was myth. It was the beginning of manhood, the moment when the child is broken open by the world, and something deeper rises in his place. Being male is biology. Manhood is earned. It's forged in trial, affirmed through courage, and sanctified by a sense of purpose. The puer longs for ease. He craves warmth, safety, pleasure. But manhood calls for sacrifice. It demands soul. Jung writes, "For the hero, fear is a challenge and a task. If the risk is not taken, life loses its meaning and slips into a flat, gray haze. Initiation is not gentle, it is fire. And in our modern world, these rites of passage have vanished. We no longer have elders dragging us into the wild. So instead, some turn to substitutes, military service, extreme fitness, survival fantasies. These men don't just want thrill. They long for a trial that will baptize them into real life. Psychologically, what they're waiting for is archetypal ignition, something ancient within them to awaken and orient their lives. For women, the puer archetype meets its initiatory death differently. It may come through the sacred weight of childbirth, where Aphrodite, goddess of beauty and seduction, is laid upon the altar so the mother may rise in her place. In that moment, something dies, and something divine is born. But not all mothers transcend the puella, and not all childless women remain children. It is not biology that defines the journey. It is the willingness to walk into the fire. Dreams are not just echoes of the mind. They are lanterns in the dark, guiding us toward wholeness. The inner child often emerges here, cloaked in symbols. Sometimes it trails behind us, a shadow of what we've refused to outgrow. Dependency, avoidance, inertia. Other times, it gleams ahead, radiant, beckoning us toward rebirth and expansion. Both are real. One is the chain, the other the star. The backward pull, the regressive child, must be surrendered. It clings to comfort and illusion. But the divine child of tomorrow is a promise of becoming, the seed of transformation. As we shift, our dreams shift with us. The unconscious is alive, and it watches how we treat its messengers. When we write our dreams, when we sketch their wild forms in color and light, something begins to move on both sides. The veil thins. We can step into those dream images consciously through active imagination. We meet the symbols halfway. We enter them, speak with them, shape them. And in that sacred dialogue, a hidden truth begins to awaken. Dreams don't need to be understood by us. They already understand us. Swiss painter Peter Burkhauser once dreamt of the puer aeternus and translated it into mythic form on canvas. A radiant boy, divine and wild, rode a cosmic stallion, thundering in from the far reaches of the collective unconscious. He didn't belong to earth or time. He was starlight in motion, the self in symbolic form. The boy had 4 arms, and from one hand bloomed an 8-pointed flower, mystical and geometric. The number 4, the sacred quaternity, echoes again. The cross, the compass, the elements, the cardinal directions. It speaks of totality, of divine symmetry. This vision mirrors the spirit of William Blake, a man who did not simply paint but perceived. His world was not built of facts, but of fire. He once said, "The tree which moves some to tears of joy is in the eyes of others only a green thing which stands in the way. As a man is, so he sees." Blake had glimpsed eternity behind form. He knew the world was shaped by the eyes that beheld it. And through those eyes, through imagination, the infinite reveals itself, not as fantasy, but as truth. If you made it to this point, you're not just watching, you're remembering, reclaiming, integrating. Comment below. I honor the child within me, the dreamer, the wanderer, the eternal flame, and I commit to grounding that light in the world. Also share with me, what part of your inner child are you reclaiming today? Let's see how many of us are ready to live with wonder and depth. If this journey stirred something deep in you, don't let it fade. Like this video to keep the spark alive. Subscribe for more soul-centered insight, and share this with someone whose inner child still dreams.